Hey everybody, welcome back to the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. This is the Practice Report. It is brought to you by Byers Auto. Ohio State now through 6 practices of spring. Time is flying. Getting pretty deep into this already, near the midway point. They will get there on Thursday, and then they will have Student Appreciation Day on Saturday. Today we got to talk, first we got to see about 30 minutes of open viewing period. Very educational. And then super educational graduate level courses with Ryan Day, Jim Knowles, and Kevin Wilson. Spencer Holbrook, Tim May, Jeremy Birmingham, and me, Austin Ward. We're going to dive into all of that. A lot to process, Berm.
It's so much football talk, man. I mean, it's just different. When we get to watch a lot of football, and we're fortunate. But if you get a chance to really hear football coaches talk football, like Ryan Day and Kevin Wilson and Jim Knowles, like those guys are having, as you said, I mean, in jest sort of, but those are next level conversations about the game. And what you heard really was coaches that are excited about what they're seeing. And I don't want to pump it up too much at 6 practices into spring, but they seem very, very happy with where this program is right now, especially considering where they could be based on the way last season ended in a disappointing manner. So I think that's, for me, the takeaway. Like, these guys are, I don't think it's lip service that they're really happy where the team is, but obviously you had a long way to go.
Yeah, Ryan Day said we're right where we need to be. That's basically all you need to know right now, and we learned a lot, whether it's starting 5 offensive linemen. Kevin Wilson kind of named them. You talked about who's playing nickel, who's playing deep safety, where Jim Knowles wants certain guys. We learned that the Leo doesn't exist yet because you can't be the Leo without becoming the Jack. So we got the Jack right now. And so
wait, is that like a Pokemon? I wasn't remembering when that happened.
You have to be the king of the jungle before you can be the Jack.
Even though the lion hangs out on the savannah. That's another story.
It was a lot of...
It's like an evolution?
I think Jim Knowles is messing with us. Okay. Like he's trying to have a little bit of fun. Like, oh, well, first you guys thought it was going to be the Jack, and then I called it the Leo, and now I flipped it after 6 practices, and good luck trying to figure it out.
And who's the adjuster? Who knows?
But maybe we'll never know.
I'm adjusting because I don't understand what the hell we're talking about.
So for right now,
I'm just a bandit stealing money covering football.
Oh, no.
Oh, boy.
Well, we got them all in the show. But there was so much to take in. It's almost impossible to break down, like what we learned about this practice and do a full practice report, because we could probably stand here and talk for an hour about what they said. But like you guys said, these are like doctorate level courses that these guys are trying to give to, people who are just trying to understand exactly where things are going.
Yeah, but what we did learn was they kind of rolled in that Leo package to a certain extent, a little bit more extensively today, for example, and that Jack, as I called him, Jack Sawyer, is one of those guys in the running for it. We know Cade Stover is not at least
currently.
Right now, not currently, because he switched back over to tight end. But, I'm just intrigued because this time in December, I guess it wouldn't be this time in December, but about this time of the month in December, they didn't seem to have enough linebackers to put enough linebackers on the field in the Rose Bowl. Now they're talking about a glut at linebacker, which is interesting. And
last spring game, they were playing a long snapper at linebacker.
Right, exactly.
In December, they were moving a tight end to linebacker, and yet today they're telling them, we got too many linebackers.
Right, you got 2 running backs, former running backs vying for maybe playing a lot at linebacker, as we know now with Steel Chambers and Chip Trainum, their transfer. But it's just interesting to me how things have just changed in like a half a year, and just also from a mental attitude things. I mean, Jim Knowles really likes the effort he's seeing out there on defense, and I think that shows.
In terms of personnel, obviously the biggest development for Ohio State today was that Cade Stover was back wearing a different color jersey and back on the offensive side of the football and back at tight end. Other than about a 4-month sort of cameo, 1 month for the Rose Bowl, and then going through winter workouts in the first 4 practices of spring at linebacker, he's still been focused on tight end and developing there. So it's not as if he's starting over from scratch or hasn't got this built-in stuff, but it's significant for a couple of reasons. And I think when we mentioned this in the Lettermen Lounge on Monday, question, well, does this mean that he just wasn't able to compete at linebacker? Well, we know that there's a logjam. It's going to be difficult for anyone to win a top job at Leo, Jack, or one of those 2 spots, especially with Tommy Eichenberg and Steel Chambers playing very well so far in camp. And then we talked about inexperienced but talent at tight end. Well, if you need a veteran, if you need someone who can handle the physical part of the game and inline blocking, Cade Stover's obviously going to bring that, and he probably has a clearer path to playing time, and he probably has recognized that through 6 practices. I won't speak for him, but it's not as if there's panic at either side, and indecision. Cade Stover is going to say what's best for him, and Ohio State's going to let him find that role. And eventually, though, both of them need to say, this has got to be it.
Coaches here told me 2 years ago they thought Cade Stover could be an NFL tight end. I think they still believe that. I just think Cade Stover is an athlete that could be an NFL athlete no matter where he plays. But it's clear to me that if you look at the tight ends, and Kevin Wilson talked about it extensively on Tuesday morning, is that there's not really a guy that you can put out there and trust that he's going to help secure the offensive line as a blocker. Joe Royer is athletic. I mean, he's learning how to block. G. Scott's athletic, learning how to block. Mitch Rossi's a fullback. Sam Hart's not ready to be that guy. Bennett Christian's not. Cade Stover is 260 pounds, and you need to have someone out there that can be that guy. Ohio State, whether fans love it or not, they want to play that 12 personnel. They want 2 tight ends, and Cade Stover makes the most sense as the option opposite Joe Royer. Now, to me, I think the most interesting thing about that is at that Jack position, Jack, Leo, whatever, is that clearly it seems like that is a battle between Jack Sawyer and Mitchell Melton, who Mitch, even in the class of 2020, was sort of overlooked, not as a guy, or 2019, sorry, wasn't even a guy that people really talked a lot about. Right. There was a lot of buzz around his name last spring before he got hurt, and to hear that he sort of pushed himself into that very almost direct competition with Jack Sawyer for that spot, I think is really interesting.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of different guys who could fit a hybrid role here, but as long as we're talking about, the defensive end, linebacker spot, those guys just seem to fit. And Mitchell Melton, I thought last year he had a chance to really do something special and push for playing time when everybody was young. And you think about what he could have added to this defense with guys who were inexperienced, and you were rotating all kinds of guys. He could have really, put his name on this defense as one of the guys who could be a real breakout star this year. And to see him have an ACL injury, a brutal knee injury, and to come back from it and now be listed as the silver bullet of the day, which I thought was interesting today. Jim Knowles talking about that, and to be, the guy who's being named with JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer and some of these, really high level, like 5-star type of guys. This shows you the ceiling that Mitchell Melton has. He could be a special player in this Ohio State defense.
They're already thinking along because, the first practice when they were not in pads and stuff for spring way back when, he and Jack Sawyer were standing up a few times. You could see already what they were thinking. This hadn't been a development that's just happened in the last few days, but to be put there, but then show you have the ability to play that position is going to be huge for him. And you really like his upside. It's really interesting too, like you pointed out in the practice observations at LettermenRow.com. I mean, Josh Proctor out there at least doing some drills. That's big time for this defense. In the meantime, you've got some guys stepping up in that safety, in those 3 safety spots, not the least of whom was Ronnie Hickman, who, Jim Knowles raved about him again today, just his football savvy and ability to get up in there and make some things happen. We've talked about this a bunch. There are a lot of guys that paid dues last year or didn't get to play last year are now going to be stepping up, and it's a total different, bunch of building blocks for this defense and Jim Knowles. You agree?
Berm, there was somebody mentioned at nickel cornerback.
Yeah.
Who's that?
His name is Cameron Martinez.
Stunner. There's a lot of guys on this team that can play really good football, and it's just about finding out what the best fit is. And it's almost like a line change in hockey at this point. If you're looking at the way that they can rotate in defensive linemen, we still didn't talk about Zach Harrison and Tyler Friday and Javonte Jean-Baptiste, and there's a lot of dudes on this team that are getting a chance to play. Tanner McAllister at safety, Ronnie Hickman, Josh Proctor, Lathan Ransom when he comes back. I mean, Bryson Shaw started every game last year except for one, and no one talks about him.
Yeah, no one said a word about him.
We haven't said his name in 3 weeks, and I don't think it's fair to eliminate him from the discussion as saying, this guy can't play, or he started every game. He got
much better by the end of the year.
He had a couple rough outings, and he got better. And that's the way last year was. And I think you just have to expect that this spring is really about finding the puzzle pieces that fit best together and saying, hey, if Ronnie's out here, maybe we can do this with Mitch. If Bryson's out here, maybe we need to have Reed Carrico over it. There's a lot of he's a guy whose name was brought up today multiple times. It's just it is very deep on this roster right now.
And a lot of it is going to be much more subtle than what we're talking about with Cade Stover, or to a lesser extent, Mitchell Melton. Like Legend Cavazos, I know from conversations last week, and we saw his father out for pro day. Like Legend had been working in that nickel spot, and he's in there in that mix with Cameron Martinez and Tanner McAllister. So sometimes it can be as simple as, okay, well, you have 4 cornerbacks here. You know that those 4 are going to be in the rotation. What does that mean for Legend Cavazos, who I've been critical of his play and practice habits and weight room work in the past? Clearly, he's a different guy, I think, this spring or coming off this winter, and you can see that. So what does that mean? If he's not in the top 4, well, maybe he can transition a little bit and play and help in that nickel role, and maybe that'll fit. We'll see. Tanner McAllister's got that first crack at it, and he's got his black stripe off. He's giving some of that veteran know-how, the ability to translate Jim Knowles to the rest of these guys. But then you're talking about Legend Cavazos and to Berm's point, he and Cameron Martinez, who are both pretty high-level athletes and were coveted by Ohio State for good reason during their recruitment. So this is a time of experimentation. It's a time of getting the fundamentals right, and you have to figure out what's the best path forward. Sometimes it's much more obvious.
Like the offensive line, it seems obvious, right? Like that's one spot where we know the 5. I mean, that's going to be the 5 guys. And I wanted to ask you about it today, and we talked about it a little bit on Lettermen Live, but like this line should be better than last year, despite the fact that no one would look at last year's 5 offensive linemen and criticize any one of them individually or say, hey, that guy doesn't belong as a starter, because they all did, but just maybe not how they were organized.
Meaning now the way they fit.
Right. The fit is better with the 2 true guards, and it's not a knock on Thayer Munford or a knock on having Paris Johnson at guard or anyone else. But you lose 2 NFL players in Thayer Munford and Nick Petit-Frere, and this line should be better. So sometimes, like I'm saying, it's just about how the pieces fit together.
It's the sum of the parts. They just didn't seem to mesh last year. When you get a guy who's as smart and as physically ready as Donovan Jackson beside a DeJuan Jones or beside a Paris Johnson, who's a surefire, can't miss, going to be probably first-round pick, and then you've got a second-year Luke Whippler beside 2 guards instead of playing next to 2 tackles, and then trying to get the footwork of guard down. Everything just seems to be meshing together already through 6 practices, better than when we looked out there in the fall in August and said, is that Thayer Munford at guard? And so it just seems like everything's already starting to come together, and the sum of the parts just seems to be a lot better. It looks a lot better, and I think it's going to look a lot better on the field in August.
And in past that, I asked Jim Knowles, is there a guy that's flashed to him from the offensive side of the ball? Because he gets to watch them every day when he watches video. And of course, he basically funneled back down to C.J. Stroud, the way this guy in 7-on-7s just finds that little weak spot and delivers the ball, et cetera. And we heard Kevin Wilson gush about him, too. It appears that C.J. Stroud is even making strides this year or this spring.
Strouds.
Strides. But I'm going to write about that because, it's just everything. You can always get better, but it's just amazing because people are talking about C.J. Stroud now as maybe the elite quarterback in the nation. And I think he has a chance to be there.
I think that we have a tendency, and I know commenters have mentioned it, like it's easy to get hyperbolic in the spring.
Sure.
I can only speak from what we saw last spring to this spring. I don't see a lot of confusion out here in the periods we're getting to watch. And last spring, there was a lot of, where do I fit? This group seems extremely razor focused. Laser face.
Razor sharp, laser focused.
Yes. And some of this is going to be similar. If we're talking about individual talent, Zach Harrison has always been physically gifted. So last March or April, we were going to be saying this is the ceiling, this is the potential for him. But, a lot of those guys didn't realize that because of what we're talking about, the schematics, the personnel sub packages, none of it made a ton of sense to watch or for them to play. And that's just calling it like it is, that they didn't put together a plan that was effective to maximize that potential that everyone could see on this field. So yeah, you would look at that roster 1 through 85 last spring and would stand out here and say, well, this is a really freaking talented team. And they were, but they didn't maximize that. And they are only 6 practices into this now. We don't know what it's going to look like on September 3rd and beyond, if they will. But it certainly seems like there's more work being done to define roles and find the best fit, which they're not going to force Cade Stover to play a position he doesn't want to. They're not going to force Mitchell Melton or Legend Cavazos or anyone else, Donovan Jackson, Paris Johnson, there has to be buy-in on that. And that wasn't even necessarily what the issue was last year, but there wasn't a clearly defined and executed plan.
Yeah.
What they're doing right now, it seems, is laying that out. They're not going to stay static in the same position every single day. They're going to make sure that that work is ongoing. But I think when you're talking about Mitchell Melton from day one, we'd see him as soon as special teams individual work was done. He's going straight to that corner right down there with Larry Johnson and the Rushman.
Yep.
That was to get him ready for this Leo Jack position. Jack Sawyer, you know that work is being done because they envisioned him in that role. He was asked, Jim Knowles specifically about JT Tuimoloau. Could he play the Jack Leo? They're not doing that with him. Could he play that role? Yes. Will he? They're not making any sort of preparations for that. So
they have people better suited to play that
and
role.
it doesn't make a lot of sense to make these moves recklessly.
Yes.
And I think that everything they've done so far is with a purpose. Now, that's going to be only revealed in hindsight when we get to the end of the year.
Yeah,
Did they execute that plan? But I think my feeling is through 6 practices, you can see what it actually is more clearly than you could a year ago.
You know what's interesting? I think the Jim Knowles defense is it's not simple-minded. It's a fairly simple idea of just making the offensive line wonder what the heck is going on, make the quarterback wonder what the heck is going on. And he hit the nail on the head today when he was talking about it. He goes, 707, he goes, wow, C.J. Stroud and Jackson Smith and Jigba and Marvin Harrison Jr., all those guys running around, it's tough.
Yeah.
But when you throw those 4 guys in there with their hands down, maybe one standing up eventually, it's a total different game because Tyleik Williams is coming off the ball right now. Michael Hall, these guys we've all written about or will write about, Zach Harrison, et cetera, they're coming off the ball. They're becoming a force like they talked about becoming halfway through the Rose Bowl last year. They've gotten that little bit in their mouth down there coming after it. And that's really going to set the tone one way or the other for how good this defense ends up being.
It almost seems like last year, going back to last spring versus this spring and some of the observations, it seems like last year there was all the parts to build like the best, like your dream home, and there's just not a blueprint for it. You got all the parts.
It's like something from IKEA.
Yeah.
You get a great box and you're like, I don't know how to put it together.
You just throw the directions out and you're like, okay, we're going to figure this out. Everything's going to come together
Somebody stole
eventually.
the screw package.
Yeah.
This year, it seems like they've got all these parts to build the dream house, and they've got one blueprint of like, okay, this is what it's going to look like. This is how it's going to get done. There might be a couple interchangeable parts, but that is the vision for how this is going to go. And, I like to make analogies, and I think that one kind of fits this because Jim Knowles is talking about, like you said, Austin, JT Tuimoloau could play that role. Why would you do that if you've got Jack Sawyer and Mitchell Melton to do that?
Why would you do that if JT Tuimoloau is your best defensive end on the other side?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Touched on
so
that. Yeah.
it just everything seems to be, I don't know. I don't want to downplay what the coaches did
chemistry.
last year.
There feels like a different chemistry.
It also
right
feels
now.
like there's a plan. That's the big word, I think.
Plan.
I like the plan.
Again, we get hyperbolic. It's spring. We want to talk about what's happening, but there does just feel like a different energy. Maybe it's Jim Knowles and his sort of karmic
mysticism.
I don't know, but like it's calmer.
Brain.
It's calmer, but it's more focused and more, I think.
But you know what? He doesn't
dialed
like
in.
incense. He lights a cigar when he wants to ponder. That's what I like about Jim Knowles.
I don't think I've ever asked a defensive coordinator about his approach, and he said meditation and cigars.
Yeah.
Whatever works, man.
I appreciate that about him. It was great.
Listen, the amount of alcohol that the Ohio State defense made people drink in the last 3 years, if it takes a cigar to smooth it out, let's get there.
A really good cigar is totally underrated.
Wow.
Let's
You
get
guys,
there.
you guys make great points. We learned a ton on Tuesday morning. We're going to keep breaking that down all week for you. We, as Tim said, we could probably stay out here for 2 hours on the practice report brought to you by Buyers Auto, but we're not going to. We've got a lot more content and comments coming throughout the week. That's Spencer Holbrook, Tim May, Jeremy Birmingham. I am Austin Ward. Stay with us for full coverage of the Ohio State Buckeyes at LettermenRow.com.